Harm OCD. What is it? How do we treat it? Can we ever get rid of it? This is actually a very sharp knife, so I'm going to be careful with it. Now I'm holding this knife. For people with Harm OCD, that might create a little bit of anxiety for you, or maybe a lot of anxiety for you. I could harm myself. I'm in the room. The only other living beings in this room are 3 cats. Now, I can create the thought that I might go slice them up. I don't like that thought. I love my cats. But for me, even though I can't disprove that thought, I don't have a certainty that in 2 minutes something might flip in my brain and I might go do it. I am willing to sit here with a knife, take the risk, and live my life. Even though it's odd, I wouldn't be sitting here with a knife if I weren't making this video. But just to illustrate the point here. So what is Harm OCD? Well, these days on the internet, you can figure anything out. If you're coming to my channel new, and this is your first exposure to it, if you will, my name is Brian. I also go by OCD Mindful. I am a certified mindfulness instructor and a former, proud to say, former OCD sufferer, and someone who lives with the possibility that my OCD could come back any second now and lives my life moving forward. And I don't spend any time trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we'll get into why some of that is when we talk more about the details. So Harm OCD is a pretty broad subset of OCD where people's obsessions focus on whether they're going to hurt or kill other people or creatures, why they have these thoughts, what these thoughts mean, and they spend a tremendous amount of time trying to undo the thoughts or disprove the thoughts, to get rid of the feelings that accompany the thoughts. And so in the world of OCD, we refer to those actions, the undoing, the getting away, the proving, the disproving, the solving, as rituals or compulsions. OCD, obsession, and compulsive disorder. So the C stands for compulsions, and rituals, I don't know why people call them several things. But so, yeah, so someone with Harm OCD, to give an example, might be holding a baby, and the thought might pop up that I could bash this baby into the ground right now. Like, I could easily kill this baby. And I'm sorry to say it, I might say some triggering things in my videos. I will never give any reassurance. Some of my videos, I might even intend to provide an exposure for you on the house. And if that makes you feel uncomfortable, well, the treatment for OCD is exposure response prevention. So you're welcome. You're welcome if that makes you feel uncomfortable. So I have the thought, I'm holding a baby, or I'm holding one of my little cats here. Come here. That didn't work. He ran off. He thought I was going to kill him. So I'm holding something, and I might do some damage to it, and might bash it against the ground, might stab someone. If I'm holding a knife at dinner, I might kill my family. In the middle of the night, I might snap and grab a gun and kill my whole family. And for people with Harm OCD, they really need to figure out that these thoughts aren't real. They create a whole bunch of anxiety. They begin to obsess about them over and over, usually in the form of trying to disprove or analyze or figure out or just generally get rid of. And so they find rituals that, for a lot of people, find rituals that are temporarily successful. And what that means is the ritual, you know, it shoots a whole bunch of dopamine into your brain, your anxiety goes down, you seemingly disprove the content of your obsession, and then you feel okay for a little while until, as is the case with obsessive compulsive disorder, the thought comes back and tends to come back stronger, because every time you repeat a ritual, you are resending this signal to the brain that we need to escape this. We need to figure this out. We can't live like this. And so the more you practice a behavior like that, the more you get stronger with that behavior. So let's see here. I just wrote down a few notes. Oh, so the reason I'm making this video is because I do have a fair amount of subscribers now, and I get questions all the time about OCD. Now, I personally, I will say that I never had full-blown Harm OCD. I have suffered from several other forms of OCD. But there were what I would call momentary feelings of Harm OCD. And I would categorize this as never having full-blown Harm OCD because they didn't tend to stick around the same way that other OCD themes in my life did. I didn't need to keep going back and disproving them. But when the thought came up, it would definitely create a whole lot of anxiety. My brain would want to disprove it or figure it out some way or the other. And so, yeah, so the obsession here is different for different people, but mostly it's the fear that you are some sort of evil psychopath and you feel disgusted that you even have these thoughts, and it creates a ton of anxiety, and you want to disprove that you are this evil person that exists in your thoughts. For other people, it's a fear of what happens after. Let's say I snap and kill somebody, well then I'm gonna be thrown in jail for the rest of my life, or I might even get put to death myself. And so the obsession itself and the feared consequences can be slightly different for different people, and they are. And this is why it's important to have a treatment plan specifically for your personal set of fears and consequences. Okay, so how do we treat it? Well, we treat it the same way we treat all forms of OCD, with a treatment strategy that's known as ERP, exposure and response prevention. And on top of that, I like to say this now as an important strategy in and of itself, as an important treatment in and of itself, is the acceptance of uncertainty. Because I see it more and more that people are saying they're willing to do ERP and they go and do it, but they're not doing the crucial part. The first step, I would say, in the process of recovering from any OCD is the acceptance of uncertainty. So acceptance of uncertainty, exposure response prevention, and another front line of treatment is SSRI medication. And there's more and more interesting research being done about psilocybin. I did make a video about that. Feel free to look up that stuff on your own. That's still very controversial, so I'm not going to say I support it or support you trying it or whatever, but I have done it myself. I have done it way past the point where I was having OCD, so it's hard to say what the changes would have been in my life if I had experimented with psilocybin during my really bad OCD years. So, acceptance of uncertainty. What does that mean? Well, this is the first step. I would recommend everyone read Dr. Jonathan Grayson's book on, boy, what does he call it? It's got to be up there somewhere. Freedom from OCD. And it's something like a tailored guide to living with uncertainty, something like that. And Grayson is by far and away the best guy out there at hitting the point about uncertainty, because this is the engine that keeps this thing moving, is your intolerance of uncertainty. So it exists this way with almost every type of OCD, and especially with something like Harm OCD. It is your intolerance of not knowing if these thoughts are real, if you're going to ever act on them, your intolerance for the feelings that come along with them, and your constant compulsion to get rid of them, to disprove them, to undo them. Oh, there he is. Hey! You know, I really looked at him there with the knife in my hand. I wanted that to feel as real as possible. You guys probably think I'm a sick, sick man. Well, so what we mean when we say acceptance of uncertainty is the giving up, really, of all the rituals that you are doing to try to figure it out, to try to get certainty. If you are doing ERP without accepting uncertainty and without giving up the search for the answer, then you probably aren't going to make progress. They're polar opposites of each other. And the mechanism that makes you better for OCD when you're doing exposure and response prevention is habituation. Okay, so I talk about this all the time, is you can't really habituate to something, even if you're doing exposures for it, if on the back end, you are still not accepting the possibility, even as small as it might be, that these thoughts aren't just thoughts, that maybe there's some truth to them. Maybe you will wake up tomorrow and finally snap and kill your whole family. And that is what we mean really by acceptance of uncertainty, is giving up all of those attempts that you're doing to get certainty that this isn't real, this can't be real, I'll never do this, I'm not that type of person. And so treatment, unfortunately, is a pain in the ass. It sucks for OCD. And there should be an expectation with treatment that once you give up your rituals and you intentionally expose yourself and you accept uncertainty, that in the beginning, your OCD will probably feel worse, okay? Because you're not leaning on those little rituals that used to give you some temporary relief. So we start by accepting uncertainty. The second thing is we implement exposure and response prevention. Now, again, it's good to have a tailored exposure and response prevention hierarchy, as most therapists would do it, would be to start you on things that don't provoke all that much anxiety, you know, maybe a level 1, then you go to a level 2, to a level 3. Most therapists still work off of a hierarchy. There's research that shows you don't have to go in a stepwise order like that. You could jump right in. There's a term called flooding. You could just jump right in. I personally don't recommend that. I do like the idea of starting kind of small and showing your brain that, hey, we don't have to have a certainty on this. I don't have to answer this right now. And I can actually tolerate the discomfort and the uncertainty. This is what the point of treatment really is to build up your tolerance for the crappy feeling, for the thoughts being there, and for the uncertainty itself. Maybe you'll never figure out if you really are this twisted psychopath that's going to kill a bunch of people. Maybe you did actually hit someone with your car, and you're going to choose to not zip around the block there to see if there's anyone dead on the street. You're going to accept the uncertainty, and you're going to show your brain that, hey, when we don't engage in the ritual, sure, we invite and allow the feelings that come along with it to be there, but we don't try to get rid of them. That sends a very powerful signal to your brain that we don't need to continue to try to disprove this thing or try to get rid of it or try to figure it out. We can tolerate not having complete certainty right now and still moving forward and living our lives. And so that's that would be, I'd say, step 2. So you have accepting uncertainty, giving up all attempts at getting certainty, intentionally doing exposures, and response prevention. Response prevention and acceptance of uncertainty really do go hand in hand. So let's talk a little bit about exposures. Exposures, like we said, most people will do on a hierarchy. These are things that you intentionally step into and usually do in the form of behaviors, or you could do imaginal scripts or creating the thought yourself that intentionally provoke the thought, provoke the anxiety. And the goal here is to allow that stuff to come up, to not do any ritual, to let it do what it's going to do, and eventually, maybe, it'll subside on its own. And every time you go through a cycle like that, of not doing the ritual and living with the risk and choosing uncertainty, your OCD gets a little weaker. It gets a little weaker, gets a little weaker. Definitely takes time. Like all forms of OCD, if you're watching this video hoping that I'm going to say something that like is going to make this thing go away, I'm sorry. I'm the opposite of that. I'm going to encourage you to put your best foot forward, to do exposures, to intentionally make the doubt and the thought seem more realistic, and to recognize that the more you actually create tough feelings for yourself and learn how to invite them in and be non-judgmental with them and just watch them do their thing, the more you get freedom from this condition. So, sort of like inviting a bunch of temporary pain in for eventually much more permanent pleasure, which really is the polar opposite of what OCD wants to do. OCD wants to get some temporary pleasure, but then it keeps you spinning in a world of permanent pain. So it's the opposite. So exposures could be something like, for people with Harm OCD, it's a lot of avoidant behavior. So they might not be around knives, or they may refuse to hold a baby or a small puppy or something like that. They might even refuse to drive their car because there's a fear that they'll hit somebody and they don't have control over it. So avoidant behavior is a big one, and avoidant behavior is a compulsion. So people who are afraid to pick up a knife and, cut the family turkey on Thanksgiving because they're holding the knife, and now the thought's in their head, what if I do it? What if I do it? It's right in my hand. And then they think about it and they can't disprove the thought. For most people with Harm OCD, it feels real. Everybody with OCD will say the same thing. The feelings feel very real. And so that's what makes this condition so hard. So exposures, yeah, you could watch movies or read articles about people who did snap and kill their family, and stay open to the possibility that that might be you. All kinds of exposures. But you would want to work with someone who can really craft them in a way that works for your particular fears, because everybody is different. It is kind of hard to generally treat this, but the basic idea is find the things that that you most avoid and that you're most afraid might happen or are already true about yourself, and those are the things you expose yourself to. And the ritual prevention means we don't do anything to try to get out of it, to try to disprove it, to try to make the feelings go away. So yeah, acceptance of uncertainty, exposure response prevention. And then, since I am a mindfulness practitioner myself, and I found that I got a ton of benefit from the mindfulness practice, that's another thing that I advise people get into. My own personal journey was I failed at ERP for years. And once I started practicing mindfulness meditation, learning how to look at my own thoughts, learning how to sort of observe them from a different standpoint, as though I wasn't directly connected to them, my relationship to them changed. And I felt like I had a lot more strength and resolve to deal with uncertainty and to walk away from answering the question and to put my best foot forward and do the exposures that I was really afraid to do. So, okay. I hope that was some help to you guys if you're suffering from Harm OCD. If you would like to shoot me a question, I am at ocdmindful@gmail.com. I do get a ton of questions, so if I don't get back to you right away, I apologize. And all right, I'll catch you guys next time.